Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Summer Hikaru Died, Season 1, Episode 11. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we have Yoshiki and his dad finally talking. The way Yoshiki talked about it, he's like, I haven't talked to my dad in years. I mean, they've had even over the course of the show, we've only seen them have two 5-second exchanges, probably in totality, across the entire season so far. So this is the most extensive discussion they've had in years. Definitely the only one they've had, so from what we've seen in their story. We're still walking away from it, not 100% sure why. And maybe it has something to do with whatever's going on between Yoshiki and his mom. Because I did forget that was something brought up at the beginning of the season, that his parents did argue a bit. So I don't know if they're staying together just for the sake of the kids, but maybe they're debating a divorce or something like that. Because, before we get into the Indo family and their sin and stuff like that, the way he talks about it, he was referencing how Yoshiki is so much like his mom. Like he's brave and strong like she is. I'm thinking, maybe that's also plays a part in why Yoshiki and his dad don't get along, just because Yoshiki's a lot more like his mom than his dad. But then even Yoshiki kind of laments that he's a little bit like his dad. In fact, he was like, I hate how much alike we are. But, maybe that's what it is. Maybe Yoshiki keeps such a distance to his dad because he sees, he feels like his dad isn't trying hard enough to fix everything, because he calls his dad pathetic, but it's why won't you talk to mom? Maybe you should talk to mom about stuff. And he's like, well, he's scared because he's like, your mom is so strong, and it's I'm afraid that if I talk to her, I won't belong here anymore. It's almost I guess he's almost afraid I won't have a place here anymore, because you're almost your mom will smarten up and get rid of me if we have that conversation. It feels like he says it's going to lead to a divorce, because she's going to realize that her and the family are better off without him. That's kind of the subtext. I don't know if that's overtly what it's saying. That's what I was kind of reading from it. So I don't know. So and even his sister and his mom were listening in on the conversation. Even she's like, whoa, bro and dad are actually talking. And his mom is like, yeah, he's able to keep up a good face around the kids. I guess showcasing whatever's going on, he's able to put on a brave face, everything's okay, trying to pretend everything's okay. And maybe she's a little more of it is what it is, and I'm not trying to hide it. Maybe, I don't know. I'm so curious what's going on there. Circling over to a crucial part of this story is us finally learning what the Indo family did, and it gives us finally give us the full context of everything we'd seen bits and pieces of. Once again, we've seen multiple times someone that looks like Hikaru, his ancestor, holding what appeared to be a head. Well, we find out that basically a ancestor of the Indo family, their wife died, and he was desperate to bring his wife back to life. So he went to Anuki and was like, please bring my wife back to life. I'll give you whatever you want, if it means you'll bring back my wife. And then it kind of becomes that be careful what you wish for thing. She came back to life, but the process ended up killing so many people in the village. This is the thing that wiped out villagers. We saw some of these bits in in darkened reddish black light. I knew I saw something with a horse. Some people got stomped by a horse. Some people decapitated. Some people in their family then killed themselves. Some people hung themselves. It was a whole thing. I think he said didn't he say a third of the village died or something like that? And all for this Indo ancestor's wife to be alive, but only a talking head. And then the next night she died. It's just it was, what was it all for then? And so we find out the thing that Tanaka now has, and the Hichi of it all, that's the wife's head, and it's obviously just shrunken over the years. I was like, wow, that's so interesting. Would have never guessed that that's what that was. Interesting. But this is where all the heads and stuff like that come into play, and it becomes this interesting thing where that's where all this stemmed from. And obviously this is the sin that the Indo family carries, because they're the one that set this in motion, killed a lot of people. Understandably why it's their sin. Basically every 5 years or so they have to take Hichi up to that shrine, like up to the mountain, and then basically beg the god Anuki, or Nonuki rather, for forgiveness for like the great sin that they committed. So I wonder, what does that mean with Tanaka having it? Because I'm sure Hikaru didn't complete it. It was definitely on him, but we don't. He definitely didn't get that far up. He didn't get to that location. I think he died before he got there. So, what does that mean for someone outside of this? Like specifically, what does it mean for someone who's not part of the Indo family to do it? Not unless we're going to find out some twist where I kept thinking like Kurebayashi. He's like, Tanaka was like Kurebayashi's kid, but I'm like, well, if you find out he's like related to the Indo family in some shape or form, like, because what else would he? I mean, it's supposed to be this offering and stuff like that, but it's meant to be like an apology. So I'm like, is doing that process? It's supposed to be like the new process of kind of asking for forgiveness, but also keeping like diseases and impurities away and stuff like that, right? So what is Tanaka planning on getting out of this? Like, is he trying to get a wish of his own granted, or what? Because like the thing that like even like, well, prior to this, like the thing Hikaru couldn't understand was like, well, what would I do with all those sacrifices and heads? Like, why would that be necessary? But now we know, like, it's like, well, it was kind of a sort of wish granted thing, but it still doesn't sit right with Yoshiki, because he's like, that doesn't make any sense. There were diseases and stuff like that, like plaguing the land. There's like records of it all prior to that. Like there was a long history of that. So what was Anuki doing before then? Like all of a sudden now you're granting a wish and stuff like that. So it's trying to understand, like, some of that doesn't line up, you know? Because even Yoshiki's dad talked about Kohei, Hikaru's dad, wanting this. He never wanted this to go beyond his generation. He never wanted it to be, you know, his son's sin to have to carry. So he wanted to kind of end things, because he was trying to tell the elders. In fact, he fought with them, saying that this whole continued ritual was complete and utter BS, that even saying like the god isn't what they think it is. So I'm wondering if this is kind of like, no spoilers for something else that kind of has similar, but I'm gonna dance around this spoiler about what it is specifically, but the notion of like, okay, you attribute one thing, like, oh, like this ritual has kept everything going, has kept, you know, Anuki, or rather Nonuki, up in the mountains, and that's kind of kept evil stuff away, and, you know, and all that. So because I think that was part of what, like, Yoshiki couldn't wrap his head around. I think that was part of it too. Like, the impurities were apparently already here, even though Nonuki's supposed to be a magnet for him. So, like, if there were all these disease and impurities already riddling the town before, you know, Unuki/Nonuki got involved, like, he should have already continued to be a lightning rod even back then to draw things to the mountain. Like, none of those impurities should have been down there in the village in the first place. They should have all been focused on Anuki. So like there is still some piece to this missing. So like, what if so much is being attributed to the thing inside of Hikaru, but it's completely something else? Getting back to the point I was trying to make before I went on my diatribe, is like, what if like it's that, oh, you're making all these sacrifices believing in one thing, but it's just happenstance because there's something else at play here, but you're thinking like, oh, it's Unuki/Nanuki, so we're making sacrifices or making up for sacrifices of the past, but something else was at play here that's completely unrelated, that basically you've been feeding into this story and this legend centuries, and it's kind of been for naught. And somehow maybe Koei like discovered this, because, you know, even Yoshiki's dad asked this question of like, what if he had said like, oh yeah, Kohei died like in this accident, but then he was almost like, well, what if it wasn't? And I'm like, what is he insinuating? Insinuating like the elders killed him as like retribution, or something else did? Like, I don't know if he's trying to imply like maybe Anuki or Nonuki killed him because he wasn't falling in line or something. He was almost implying like there was definitely some foul play involved. I just don't know if he was meaning like human foul play or was he referencing like some supernatural foul play or something like that. A very important scene I completely forgot to talk about that was at the early parts of the episode. It might have been like right after the opening was, Yoshiki hanging out with his dad and they're playing, like he's playing with toys and he's got like the hero toy and the monster toy and he always talks about the fact is he always gravitated towards the monster. He's like, why do they always have to lose? Like, shouldn't like the humans and the monster kind of be able to have like a peace treaty or whatever? And so he had his dad play like the human hero or whatever, and he was like, right, make sure like you lose this time. And he's like, make sure. And he's like, no, I get it. So I was like, I didn't like, that's such an interesting parallel considering like you can make the argument that Yoshiki has sided with the monster in this regard, that being, Nonuki or Onuki, the thing inside of Hikaru. And it also ties into like a large theme of this episode and kind of the whole show really, but specifically this episode too, of like the need to belong, because it's like his dad, Yoshiki's dad said like basically you crave what you lack essentially, and it's like if you feel like you don't have anywhere to belong, you're desperate to belong somewhere. And so Yoshiki touches like the pocket that has like that piece of Hikaru because he's like, right, that's all Hikaru wants. But there's also a piece of Yoshiki that's like that too, because he's like, is belonging really that important? Because he's always kind of, I think, felt like an outsider in many different ways, probably to his family, to the village, and I'm sure that's also a through line of why like Hikaru was so important to him. Like they kind of maybe filled that void for each other, and also now that like it's this thing inside of Hikaru which you connect with on this level of, well, because it's, you look at it as Hikaru, and then there's also the element of it's alone in this world with nowhere to go, and you kind of want to be that home for it in a certain way. You want to like make it feel like it belongs. First you're trying to make it fit in by pretty like, hey, be human, but then you told him, was it last episode, he didn't have to be human, that you were fine with him being what he was, kind of accepting him as he is essentially. Yoshiki ends up conveying a lot of this information to Hikaru, but Hikaru's distracted with other stuff, and he's kind of bringing up the whole thing of like, hey, what was Hikaru like? Because he apologized. He's like, oh yeah, I kind of damaged Hikaru's body. And Yoshiki was like, oh, do you want me to give you this piece back? And he's like, no, he's like, I don't think that will fix anything. In fact, he was almost kind of like, if you give it back to me, it'll most likely kind of get lost inside of me. It'll kind of get lost forever inside of me. There's no like putting it back necessarily. Like, even if you give me that back, I can't take back that piece of me that's there. Like, I think it's like once that's severed, it's severed for good. Maybe there's very extenuating circumstances that have to be brought about to like bring that piece to Hikaru back, because he's like, right, I want you to be able to heal, and maybe you're not feeling good, and maybe all this is because you're in such a weakened state, because like, right, that mark on your neck is not going away because you won't heal properly, because I'm part of the reason why you're weakened. He's like, right, if I get that back, you'll stab me. And then Yoshiki was feeling bad about it, because he was like, I ain't going to stab you again. It's he's like, I was confused, I was anxious, I was so desperate to like try and solve everything with that, but he's like, no, that wasn't right for me to do that to you. And like, to me, it's like, if I can understand you, we can make it so that you don't have to leave, you can stay here. In fact, he ended up, I think, even more so motivated because like there was an art book he accidentally knocked over and looked through, and it has a depiction of something from 1519. It was a depiction of the thing that's inside of the way other people described it, like, just people in general who've watched this series were comparing it to like an amoeba, but the thing inside of him, it was what was depicted in that picture. So it's like, that's something from 1519, and it's like, it's referred to as Gehenna, which my only reference to Gehenna is the Trails series, as a JRPG series, that Gehenna is like their version of hell. And even in real life, in religious texts, Gehenna doesn't necessarily, it kind of symbolizes that. It's not, it's kind of like a parallel. But what's also interesting though, like looking and Googling it really quickly, there has been association with like kings in the past sacrificing their own children. So there is there's still like a lot of overlap of sacrifice and stuff like that. And like I said, like there's the parallels to hell. Like I think hell is kind of based off of Gehenna because it's supposed to be like evil and punishment and stuff like that. So do forgive me for like my theological ignorance. Like theology is not my like bag. I find it interesting on some levels, but I'm not well read. So any misinformation or anything I'm misconstruing, do forgive my ignorance. So just kind of wanted to put that there. So because wasn't all the mass deaths, that wasn't till like 1700, right? So this picture of Gehenna was like from like almost 200 years beforehand. So it's like it kind of flows into the whole like, well, what was Anuki/Nonuki up to? Once again, maybe we're misconstruing that the thing inside of Hikaru is that, but maybe it isn't. Who knows? Speaking of him, the creature did ask, like, what was Hikaru like? And Yoshiki talks about it. It's like, right, he was the type, like, it was like the main protagonist of a manga. He was good at sports and stuff like that, but terrible in class. He could be friendly with everyone. He did not get along with the upperclassmen because they felt like he didn't show enough respect. But the younger classmen looked up to him. A lot of girls kind of crushed on him, and he was always excited to be like, oh, when are they going to confess to me? But most of them would end up with a boyfriend. But then there is one girl in particular he liked because she reminded him of his one of the protagonists from like that manga they're into that was also like turned into like, well, I don't know if it was originally a manga, but the movie they went to see a couple episodes back, like one of the protagonists of that, like there was a girl he had a crush on from a different class that kind of reminded him of one of those protagonists. And also he said this interesting thing where he's like, I've never seen Hikaru cry. And he even wondered like maybe Hikaru wanted to cry and just felt like he could never be in a position to, like maybe it wasn't right of him or fair of him to cry. Because it's like, right, there's plenty of sad moments, whether it's like his dad's death and the whole line of waking up every morning was a reminder that his dad was gone. I think that's probably why like he was as goofy as he was, because it was like his overcompensation of like, it's kind of like a defense mechanism for his like sadness. I wondered if that was kind of what that was kind of correlating. So, but then there's that moment where Yoshiki and Hikaru are in the hallway, and it's like Hikaru starts like freaking out, and then like the way that's animated where he just kind of like legitimately glitches, and especially like the animation on him like changes and gets like fuzzy and weird, and then like it starts oozing out of Hikaru's neck, and Yoshiki comes running. I think that is like a thing with spirits, like you're not supposed to breathe around them or something like that. There's some video game that utilized that, and I just can't remember. I'm like, am I thinking about Until Dawn where you're not supposed to breathe or move? I mean that's something spiritual related, because that was spoilers for Until Dawn. That was Wendigos, so that's why I'm like, I don't know. But it's like, I thought that was kind of like a thing of like, as long as you don't breathe, like ghosts can't see you or perceive you. Like I think maybe that's what he was kind of going for in that moment. And like Hikaru looks the most monstrous he has. Like we saw a bit of this, but it's like we as the audience saw it, but not Yoshiki. Was like after the whole attempted murder thing and he ripped out part of himself, like the very last shots where it's like it like does almost like this dark red coloring, and then you saw like the ooze out of it like making its way towards Yoshiki. I don't know if that was like the first moment of that, because that was the first time not in general, because like we saw it back in episode 3 when Hikaru grabbed onto him because he kind of had like a mental break after Yoshiki kind of pushed him away and stuff like that. So but this is the most like monstrous I think we've kind of seen him like visually in this case, of like, at least like there's still a fraction of Hikaru there, like his face as this thing's like oozing out. And just for Yoshiki, he's like, I'm scared, and he's like, oh, am I going to die, is this going to kill me? But then he's getting washed over and he's like, oh, it's warm. It's like, I'm not scared. He's like, oh, this isn't as bad. He's like, is it because I'm so mixed right now that it doesn't feel as threatening? And he reaches out to Hikaru, and in that moment Hikaru panics because he's like, wait, I did that. I almost did it to you again. And he's scared. because that was the whole thing last episode too, where he was trying to pretend like he didn't remember why he went over to Yoshiki's place, but he does, and he was trying to be like, it's fine, but it's like, it happened again. I lost control of myself, and now for him, he's scared because he's like, he doesn't want to be alone, but he's scared that if he stays here, he will kill Yoshiki. He's like, I will reach to his soul, and he's like, if I do something to his soul, like maybe Yoshiki won't be Yoshiki anymore, or I'll consume all that he is, and he'd just be an empty hut. Who knows? What's also a twist is Asao was nearby and she saw all this. So, and when we see her later on, it's like she's kind of like spacing out and just seems like heartbroken. And I'm like, I don't know how to interpret what she's feeling, because maybe for her, it's seeing Hikaru look like that made her realize Hikaru's not there anymore, that maybe for her it's like implying like, oh my god, he's dead. I mean, she might also be piecing stuff together, some of the conversation and things that Yoshiki said about like, yo, what have you found out, like Hikaru, like he made a reference to, I think it was last episode, where he was talking to others and he's like, what if you found out, like, or it might have been Hikaru who had this reference about like, what if you found out about something, and he was asking like, would you want it to go back home, and pretty much everyone else's answers was yes. So I don't know if it's like that in conjunction with like, Yoshiki's been keeping this from me and us, and he's been dealing with this on his own and feeling like a failure as a friend, not knowing what was going on between them, or like I said, does this make her realize like, oh my god, there's nothing of Hikaru left, because for you to go that far, that means Hikaru's dead and just this thing's inside. Who knows? Because she didn't go try to track down Yoshiki to talk to him. She's keeping that to herself. Because it's like, who do I really talk to about that without sounding crazy? So that's a lot. Then you have Hikaru rushing to go see Kurebayashi. And he's asking her, like, you know, it's like, what do I do? Because she's even saying, like, maybe it's your natural instinct. And that was kind of my thought, was because he's in his weakened state, especially after the thing from episode 8 that was hunting them, and then on top of that, having your head cut off in episode 9, I was like, maybe some of that is like you're in a weakened state and you're desperate and you're hungry and you're trying to replenish and fill that void. But Hikaru's almost kind of thinking like that's kind of an excuse, like he's like, I'm afraid like things would kind of be like that regardless. So he's like, should I go back to the mountains? Like, would I be protecting this village? Would all the impurities, all the bad stuff go with me? And would this place stay the same? But you have Kurebayashi almost being like, oh, don't get too hasty. I'm like, what? Like, does she herself have an ulterior motive? But it seems like she's coming from a place of, and I was talking about this recently in another anime I'm watching about a mom doing some stuff that seems kind of mean, but it's coming from a place of, I think this mom was trying to do the best she can to mitigate as much pain and hurt as possible, and I think that is what Kurebayashi is trying to do as well. She's trying to mitigate, because with Hikaru, she feels bad for Hikaru and Yoshiki, and she's like, there's already plenty of hurt already, so like it's just, it's almost like you gotta rip the band-aid off type of thing, because she had talked a little bit about her son getting mixed. It's the whole thing of like, right, when something kind of from the other world kind of gets mixed in with you, and like you start existing kind of in that in-between boundary, and stuff from the other side starts taking an interest in you. And even Hikaru was like, what will happen if Yoshiki got more mixed? She's like, I don't even want to even like think about that, you know? But she's even suggesting like her nervous reaction around Hikaru, like was she scared to say anything that would set him off, or she wants to try and make him believe, like keep him calm by being like, yeah, everything's fine, you don't have to jump to any of that. But she's like, I could just end this right now. I could just rip it out of him, and just like, yeah, like it's going to hurt both this thing as well as Yoshiki, but like everyone's already hurting. Like I just, like I said, got to rip the band-aid off. But she stops herself and she says, like, I know it's wrong, like more suffering will happen, but she's like, she feels bad for it. It's like this thing just doesn't want to be alone anymore, and it's suffering and it's scared. And regardless of, I mean, it's practically a child in itself, you know? So it's like, as a mother of a child who kind of went through something similar, like, and she's kind of went through that experience as well, like, she's not so quick to like add more pain on top of it. So, but then we see at the end of that scene, she gets a visitor, and it seems like someone she recognizes. She does seem to have some at least some knowledge about Tanaka's company. Figuring that that's probably who he's working with. And like I said, she kind of got a little like, whoa, like, oh, he's not like a medium or whatever, ha ha ha. Like, she has these moments where it's like, for the most part, she seems to be calm, cool, and collected, but like that moment, and then this moment when he was like, should I go back to the mountain? She's like, like she gets those nervous moments. I'm like, what's that all about? But the person who shows up at the end, I think that's the person that Tanaka's in contact with. I wonder why she's here. Like, well, because Tanaka is supposed to like check in, but maybe ever since his run-in with like chopping off Hikaru's head, like maybe now he's got Hichi, and like maybe it's like, oh, I got everything I need, and this will help him break away from his company, and he hasn't checked in, so they were like, she was sent to, because she's kind of his liaison, I guess, and she's there to, or to keep an eye on him to make sure he does what he's supposed to do and not stray too far away. So, because I think that's supposed to be who that is. So maybe we'll get a proper introduction next episode, get some clarity on that. But Hikaru's really drowning in all of this, and he's pissed at himself because he was like, it was arrogant of me to believe I could stay here. Like, that was like, why would I even think that? So it's like, where do I go? Like, where do I belong? And so, funny enough, the episode ends with him going back to Hikaru's place and his mom being like, welcome home. He's like, yeah, I'm home. And it's just like, that's got to make you feel all kind of weird, because it's like, well, it's not your home, but it kind of is. But like, it will never feel like home because it will always be Hikaru's home, but not your home, even though you are Hikaru, but you're not. It's complicated, and I'm so curious to see where this all take us. I believe the next episode should be the season finale. When I was reading, it's supposed to be 12 episodes, so that should be the case, but I don't know how this is going to play out, how it's going to wrap up. I actually don't even know how much of the manga we've covered at this point in time. I'd say we're probably like, I mean, I guess it all depends on pacing and stuff like that, because I'm like, I believe the manga's only up to like 9 volumes, so like, I'd assume I'll probably research into it a little bit more like after the season's over, but not unless they're pulling a Kowloon generic romance. If you've ever like watched that, or like, I'll probably save the conversation for later, but if you're familiar with like the pacing of the Kowloon generic romances anime versus like what the manga is, like, I don't know if that's what they're kind of doing with this or not. We'll have, like I said, I'll have a lengthier conversation probably when I look into it more after the season finale, because I'm so curious to see how, like, there's still so many threads to pull on, so we're nowhere near done with the story, but I'm curious to see what the end result will be, how this season will close, and what will be left in the aftermath of everything. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.